I'm literally in Italy right now. I'm here traveling and I watched the debate. Very obviously, even just a few seconds into the debate, I knew that it would be an absolute shit show. The first question that came up, Trump immediately started spewing disinformation and fear mongering what he alleges to be immigrants eating cats and dogs in Springfield, Ohio.
What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame.
ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
I was born and raised in Ohio. I live in Ohio right now. In the days since, it's turned into this kind of meme or remix of Trump saying it and eating the dogs, eating the cats. And I mean, I've danced on a previous video on this channel, but I think the point for me of mixing humor with these political analyses is to show the ridiculousness of the contradictions that we're facing. And what I've seen over the past few days is literally people of all colors and creeds online dancing to this bop about xenophobic fear-mongering.
They're eating the dogs. They're eating the cats. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. Eat the cat. They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating.
The New York Times, he complained that the 15,000 Haitian immigrants who received visas in 2017 all have AIDS. In that very same meeting, the Times reports, he said that once the 40,000 Nigerian immigrants given visas arrived in the U.S., they would never go back to their huts. The White House denies this report.
The Post reports that according to two people briefed in the meeting, the president asked, quote, "Why are we having all these people from shithole countries come here?" referring to African countries. In Haiti, the president then went on to talk about how they needed to bring in more people from places like Norway.
When I see people dance online and make jokes of it and make light of it, I don't think these same people are reading the news. I don't think these same people are intaking the literal material political violence that is happening in Springfield, Ohio right now.
It's just to mean discrimination and xenophobia and bigotry and racism.
How scared are Haitian immigrants in Springfield after hearing former President Trump's claims?
They are scared for their lives. Some of them are asking me, even yesterday I got a friend calling me asking me if he has to leave because he's scared for his life. So another friend told me that it seems that he would have had some family coming to visit him, but it seems that he gonna welcome them in Columbus or Dayton because it is not safe right now for him in Springfield to welcome his family here.
What do you make of these claims? What does it feel like to hear politicians make these false accusations?
It's very shocking and sad at the same time, especially coming from people seeking the high office of our land, high-ranking people. I think they should do better. They have everything at their disposal to check the veracity of anything that they hear. They say that they are high-educated people who attended great university. I mean, they know how to check something to see the veracity of it. And
like, seem like I'm coming down on the immigrants because it's the people that's bringing them down here. Because wherever they're at, that's what they're used to, bro. They're in the park grabbing up ducks by their neck and cutting their head off and walking off with them and eating them. Like,
in the last days alone, there have been numerous bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio. Haitian families have had threats made against them. Schools and buildings and public institutions have had to close down. Proud Boys are entering Springfield, Ohio. And the reason that it's so telling to me that I worked so hard on my last video and even already it's getting a lot of traction, I think we do need to have a deeper conversation around fascism, around how we make light of state violence and political violence, and how we often don't name it as critically as we should. And this video is going to be for anyone that is interested in unpacking the MEMEIFICAtion of US politics, people that are interested in the ways that the US public tries to distance themselves from political violence while making light of that violence. And it's going to be for people that, as my mother and a lot of other Jamaicans would say, who want to pick sense from nonsense. My name is Prince. I'm an author. I make video essays and content online about writing, about anti-capitalism, about Black anarchism, about James Baldwin, Black culture. And I'm on vacation in Italy, and this is a loud porch. So if some of this audio is off, please excuse me. Why this specifically pissed me off so much is that I was born in Ohio, but my family is from Jamaica. So my parents immigrated to the US in the late 70s. My mother, when she came to the US, experienced the ravages of desegregation and busing. For those who don't know, that was a strategy from white supremacists and people that didn't want to end segregation and didn't want to integrate schools to instead bus Black kids from Black neighborhoods to white schools and do vice versa for white kids. So instead of integrating and making education fair and equal, they decided to just bus people to another institution and expose them to prejudice and racism and all sorts of, I think having an immigrant mother who especially is a single mother, I think having a family that has experienced all kind of carcerality to the point where I literally wrote a book about my life 2 years ago titled When They Tell You to Be Good, about my family's kind of journey to the US, about the different modes of masculinity in my family, how that's led to different conceptions of carcerality that my family has experienced. And when I watch the debates and all of the fear-mongering and discourse and disinformation about immigrants and criminals coming to this country and murdering people, and all of the fear-mongering around violence and why we need to be smart on the border and smarter on crime and all these other things, I can literally look at my family and see either side of the aisle. I see women who came here, were undocumented for a number of years or not, held down jobs, raised families, sent them to public schools, and did all of the things that the American dream demands of you. All these different forms of assimilation while also trying to hold on to your home culture. There are also people in my family that have gone to jail, have been deported, have been undocumented, have come back, are the image of this illegal immigrant coming in that the news wants to weaponize so much for the sake of white supremacy and fascism. And I see my family as my family. I don't see them as a political talking point. I don't see them as something that the elite should use or justify to use more carceral force or to fund more border patrol or fund more police. And on the topic of this disinformation, I think one thing that's very telling in this whole debacle is that the Facebook post that this whole eating dogs and cats rumor came from someone in Springfield, Ohio, that shared a Facebook post and has since apologized. But this person says that they're mixed race, that they're part of the LGBT community, that they have a Black daughter. Fuck that. Fuck that. So being mixed race means that you can't spread racism, xenophobia, disinformation? It's embarrassing. Lee told NBC News that she never imagined her post would become a part of the national conversation while also spreading conspiracy theories and hate. I'm not a racist, she said, adding that her daughter is half Black and she herself is mixed race and a member of the LGBTQ plus community. Everybody seems to be turning it into that, and that was not my intention. Intention is different than impact. And it's really fascinating to me to be at these intersections, to be the product of this idea of the American dream, while also within my lifetime very clearly understanding anti-Blackness, understanding colonization, getting radicalized, and writing about it, organizing about it. I've been a grassroots organizer for literally the past 10 years. I don't just post stuff online. I don't just write. I do work in my community as much as I can wherever I am. And I keep returning to the question of, why is it so important for the American public to memeify political violence instead of resisting? Why is that the kind of first kind of point that people go to, especially online? And I think the more that I've posted online, done these video essays, done my podcast, the more people follow me and demand answers and solutions in my comments or praise the things that I say or do. I've really been thinking a lot about the pros and cons and the dangers of politicization online and how social media and politicization through the internet as like the main means of engaging with the political world that we live in, engaging with capitalism, imperialism. I see a lot of dangers in that because social media is run by corporations. Corporations are swayed by political and economic incentives, and the attention economy makes it so that people can make light of things when Ideally, we will be having nuanced conversations about Donald Trump, Kamala Harris, the role of the border, the role of immigration, the function of xenophobia, the many different ways that it shows up. And literally in my last video, I talked about how xenophobic violence is an expression of fascism through many different lenses, but especially a necropolitical lens. And now we're looking at the fact that a debate happened, Trump spread misinformation, and then now we are seeing fascist bomb threats, literal threats of danger happening to migrant communities in Springfield, Ohio. And I'm currently reading a book right now that I picked up at the beginning of this trip that I'll recommend for folks out there that want to read more. It's called The Brief History of Fascist Lies. And one point that that book makes that I think is extremely useful is that it talks about how fascism demands a political system that sees quantitative truth as less valuable than a primal truth that is based not exactly in logic, but more in a leader that has some kind of deeper knowledge about the world and is able to impart that onto the public. And it also notes that fascism also demands action. It demands violence as a way to legitimize itself. And if we look at this situation right now, we can see that happening. Trump spread disinformation, and now his followers or people that want to say the things or think the things that he's saying are resorting to political violence in Springfield, Ohio. And my question is, will the state protect these people that are having threats made against them? Local community members protect these people? Will the people dancing online to these fucking remixes of Trump literally spreading bullshit about immigrants, will any of those people protect these Haitian immigrants, any of these immigrants that are being threatened in Springfield, Ohio, or elsewhere? And I think when people make light of these things, they ignore the fact that you're laughing at political violence that doesn't affect you in the same way that it affects these people that are having threats made against them. So I want to dig into a few things in this video, but we're going to be talking about the MEMEIFICATION of US politics. What are some examples of this that we can see in our current cultural landscape? And I'm going to share some thoughts that I am leaving this kind of moment in time and space with, especially with voting only a few weeks away and the results of the 2024 US presidential election on the horizon. First, we should describe what a meme is. A meme is an image, video, piece of text, etc., typically humorous in nature, that is copied and spread repeatedly by internet users, often in slight variations, an element of culture or system of behavior passed from one individual to another by imitation or a non-genetic mean. People have made a remix of that sound clip from the debate. People are dancing to it, especially the gays are loving it. And I'm thinking, are any of these gays going to fight for Haitians or other immigrants or West Indian people when they are under attack? Probably not. Because do you remember when 2020 happened and Trump won and all the white people that were around you, if you're a person of color, were just like, I'm really upset I can't talk about it. I think the same fucking thing is going to happen again. But recently I went to a conference in San Francisco to do a keynote speech, and there was a really, really interesting session about the far left and media, and there were a bunch of things that were synthesized. But I remember one particular conversation that was had was about how far right uses memes and meme culture like NPC to kind of assert their politics. They use it as a recruitment tool, a way to legitimize different processes of state-sanctioned or extrajudicial violence. It was really interesting for me to hear this conversation because I have friends that dig into far left groups, and they monitor them and they kind of figure out what these groups are doing to kind of document and see what kind of events they're going to be holding in certain spaces ahead of time so they can inform the public anti-fascist organizations to show up and oppose the far right or fascist organizations that are going into communities to sow dissent and make people afraid and or to literally harm people. Was that a number of years ago, around the time that Trump came into power, the alt-right started using more memes to kind of express their political ideology. And eventually the non-playable character became a central point of discourse amongst the alt-right, where they would say, like, in video games, the non-playable characters are the people usually relegated to class-based positions, the clerk in the Pokemon game, or the person carrying your stuff in a fantasy game, and how in the alt-right perspective, so many of people in the world are basically like non-thinking flesh bags that exist to support the function of institutions and are basically just like mindless people not aware of the matrix, and how this is a problem for the far right because these people are parroting woke language, they're going towards progressivism, they're basically destroying this white fragile society that has been created. And now the far right even more is using this as a reason to denigrate entire populations of people, to legitimize like public acts of violence, like white people going into public spaces and committing mass violence like we've seen in different schools and different public settings, and how it's become this sort of recruitment tool for the far right. And there are different ways that the alt-right weaponizes memes and NPC, and they use it as a recruitment tool. And what was really scary and telling about this talk that I went to is that some of the people giving this talk were saying like the far right is really good at using the internet, at media, at kind of just using memes in general to reel people in. And it can be as easy as like you might see a meme and think it's funny, and then see another meme that's similar, and then a week later you're suddenly listening to Jordan Peterson and talking about how trans people shouldn't exist and literally being a TERF, and how when we use humor online, it becomes a slippery slope because we don't always realize what we're politically engaging with and how serious the ramifications of what we're engaging with are, especially when the attention economy, when algorithms, when rage farming is such a thing that can feed the algorithm and then give people social media success. And there are countless examples of mass shooters or vigilantes performing public acts of violence because of xenophobia, because of racism, and literally in their manifestos referencing NPCs or meme culture or these far-right media images that are used to denigrate the populations of people that this violence happens to. I've already been thinking about the memeification of politics in general, and it really, really just opened me up to the idea that while people are being politicized online, there is also this dichotomy in space online where we have to be careful about what we're engaging with, what we make light of, because it can easily be used as a tool for the other side, which is why we have to speak clearly, why we have to define what state and fascistic violence is, and why we have to really get angry when it's time to get angry. And for me, as a child of immigrants, as someone that grew up watching my mother experience various forms of xenophobia, as someone that literally lived in Jamaica for 2 years when I was age 3 to 5, so technically I lived there, even though my memories are very sparse, but it was a very impactful period of time. The notion of immigration is deeply important to me. It's something that people do to escape the violence that colonial powers, colonial entities like the US export abroad. And I take this really seriously. And I think on the other side of the coin, aside from how the right uses memes and social media, the more centrist or progressive aspects of the American public use memes, and how it can be really, really dangerous and pacify us into a future where we're just literally handing our rights over, and we joke about it along the way, or we try to find humor in xenophobic violence. I got radicalized in 2014 when the Black Lives Matter movement popped off, and obviously Twitter, social media platforms were a great way for people to engage in the movement. Live streams were a big way for people to learn about what was happening in Ferguson or in the Arab Spring or other movements that were happening around that time, and citizen journalism kind of got on the rise. But I think with the advent of social media apps like TikTok or the short form content or even YouTube going on the rise again and again and again, it's become interesting over the last 10 years to see how the internet has increasingly become a space for people to rage farm and or to engage politically. And I think from the Western standpoint, it makes sense. But I think what I worry about with internet politicization is that we see online activism as our main means of political expression. And I don't want to denigrate anyone who's found like a platform or a way of speaking to these things. I don't want to say that people that speak online are only online pundits or talking heads. Like, I think there are so many things that people don't see on the internet, just like in my life. There's so many things that I do politically that for security culture reasons, I don't fucking talk about it on the internet, and I probably never will. I didn't even write about some of that shit in my book. And it's interesting because I think with the front facing nature of internet politicization, there is so much that is missed on a nuanced level, and there is so much that is reduced for the sake of likes, views, comments, and engagement. I mean, just look at the whole Be Better controversy when he switched from talking about internet influencers and celebrities to talking about Kamala Harris and how people are like, you're Canadian, you're not even like a political scientist. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? Shut the fuck up. And when I look at memes and how they're utilized, I think about how George Bush was president, was with other politicians and pushed for the war on terror and made lies about weapons of mass destruction and went into Iraq and Afghanistan and literally went in and militaristically intervened and killed countless civilians. Guantanamo Bay was created by Dick Cheney, who is now endorsing Kamala Harris. And George Bush was the face of this. I mean, the war on terror went on for literally over a decade and was heavily criticized by countless people. And now George Bush gets to be this cute older man who's a painter and crushes on Michelle Obama and is sweet and oh my gosh, and he's not a war criminal. Or Michelle Obama has all these beautiful blowouts and she's so funny and cool and she's a girl boss. Yet she also is the wife of deporter-in-chief. Obama is this cool man that shares these playlists and has a great book club, but he also denigrated Baltimore protesters after the police murder of Freddie Gray. One of the functions I see of the MEMEIFICATIon of US politics, it's to defang politicians. It's to erase the very real war criminal history. It's to erase the very real xenophobic violence they have weaponized throughout their careers. It's to erase the ways that they corroborate, are complicit in, or literally benefit from war profiting, and to make them cute, to make them fun, to make them interesting. And I think the defanging aspect of it is interesting as well for me personally, because I remember when I was living in Seattle in 2016 and Bernie Sanders was running, and a lot of people around me were like, why don't you vote Bernie? Like, he's a great option. Like, what do you mean? And blah, blah, blah. And people were just really mad at me. And I remember that year, it was like post Black Lives Matter. And I was like working this organizing job that was shit. And I was just like really disillusioned with the way that institutions can use social justice in order to reel people in. And I would just tell people, like, I don't like that we're memifying him and making him cute when I think we need to be critical of politicians. That was kind of my entryway into this whole thought process. And it's only developed more and more and more. And I think some of it is just for me naturally. I am skeptical of anyone that will take on the label of politician, because I think our current political system as it stands places politicians above regular citizens, and it says like, oh, they're people that are more versed in the political world, they're more willing to engage in what the electoral college is or US imperialism or whatever the fuck. And I think I don't want someone to represent me, and I don't want to buy into the idea that someone else knows how to govern or lead way more than I do. Like, I think governance and how we should engage and shift resources in our communities and protect each other should be a communal act. It shouldn't be handed to a certain number of individuals. That's how you create a power imbalance that then necessitates money or people that have certain qualifications. And I think it's really dangerous, especially in a system like the US, where you can demand all of that on one side, and then someone who is white, mediocre, racist, sexist, vile, like Donald Trump, can just swoop in and literally be the literal expression of white mediocrity and still be able to reach one of the highest political positions in this country, if not the world. The defanging of politicians, I think, is really dangerous, because when you can make jokes or make cutesy images or girl boss Kamala Harris online, you ignore the fact that this is a person that existed and worked within the carceral system, that wants to be smart on crime, and is literally just saying the same shit as Trump about the border. So what is the point of defanging politicians? It's to make it easier for us to not be angry at them. I think the other utility of the MEMEIFICATIon of politics is to find humor in the terror of the system that we live under. And I understand some of the need to find humor, but what I don't understand is when people don't deeply politically engage in their communities and the violence that is happening around them on an organizing level, on an individual level, on a community level, but then they engage with making jokes about it online or using it for the algorithm or using it to get more followers, likes, to monetize the suffering that is happening all around us. And finding humor in it is sometimes a way for us to cope. But I also think certain modes of coping are an expression of our privilege and should be rightfully called out. I don't think these jokes are funny because I grew up going to hair stores with my mom and being followed around because we were Black. I grew up with people asking her, oh, where are you from? Like, where's your accent from? As soon as they met her and her telling me it felt really reducing to be asked where you're from immediately when you meet someone. I have seen so many different forms of political violence on a xenophobic level happen since Trump, and that mobilized me to get deeper into anti-fascism. And I've done that kind of work in the past. People find humor in something. I wonder how close their connection is to the communities that are being joked about, who have disinformation spread about them. And if people aren't in community with these people, but can still go online and make jokes about it and then not step in when this political violence or extrajudicial violence happens, is that not a form of complicity? Is that not a form of participation? If you're dancing in a video that is a remix of Trump joking about immigrants, and then that same video is sent to someone in the alt-right and they think it's funny, they're like, ha ha ha, like, you see, like, Trump did something cool there and we just gotta keep doing this. Like, do you get what I'm saying? Like, when you're dancing to something, you're almost giving it permission and you're saying that you think it's funny. Is it funny that bomb threats are being called into schools in Springfield, Ohio? Is it funny that Haitian families are not sending their children to school? Is it funny that the government will not step in and offer any kind of material like solution? Is it funny that there are no checks and balances on a governmental level to the point that anti-fascist groups have to step in and anti-fascists have died throughout the history of fighting fascism while regular citizens sit at home and make jokes about it? It's not funny. Other functions of the MEMEIFICATIon of US politics that I see is that it's a procrastination before we reach the point of anger. Like, I think sometimes when things shock us, we're like generally shocked, we're left speechless. Sometimes we are made to, it makes us sad, and sometimes we want to laugh. And sometimes it makes us angry. When I watched that debate, I think one of the reactions I had in terms of like how Kamala operated, like, I think Kamala did an interesting and legible job in terms of opposing many of Trump's points. But when I was watching her as a child of immigrants, especially a West Indian immigrant, a Jamaican dad, my family's from Jamaica, the measured response that she had wasn't enough for me. Kamala, you better throw hands. Oh wait, you're a part of the empire. You're not gonna throw hands. You're just gonna sit there and do what you need to do to not look like the angry Black woman, when you actually should probably be fucking angry. Things get worse if more state violence or extrajudicial violence or fascistic violence happens. Who's going to step in? Who's going to be angry for immigrants? Who's going to be angry for undocumented people? Who's going to be angry enough to do something? When we procrastinate a justifiable anger or response to political violence, to fascism, to xenophobia, we're literally handing over our communities, our country, our nation, our futures, because we want to find some kind of temporary humor or solace, when the far right is planning months, weeks, years ahead. Project 2025 doesn't just exist in terms of next year. It has been in the works since the existence of the US as it stands, for centuries. And how do we resist it? Is it by laughing online, finding it cute? Or is it by naming it as xenophobic violence and fascism and speaking out and taking care of your communities, starting to document what alt-right groups are coming through, organizing people that are ready to go into Black Bloc and to protect people in their communities that might face violence because Donald Trump spreads this bullshit and it gives people permission to go out and harm people. I just want to end this video on reminding people that it's important how we react when we're facing fascism. It's important how we articulate the dangers of the system that we live under. It's important that we say we shouldn't be laughing, we should be resisting by any means necessary, whether it's the state deploying the xenophobic violence, or whether it's far-right groups deploying the xenophobic violence, or it's corporations deploying the xenophobic violence. And I think it's really dangerous when we use humor to pacify ourselves while the world burns all around us, while someone else's world burns. So much of what Palestinians are demanding is that the West simply pay attention, that the West put pressure on their institutions, that the West give up some of their privilege. And I ask, if people are demanding that for Palestine, if people are demanding that for Congo, can people demand the same for migrants, immigrants, undocumented or not, in the US, in their local communities and other communities around them? Angers me is that I think most of the people dancing, laughing online aren't going to do shit when the violence really, really arrives. Most of those people laughing, joking, and dancing, I wonder if they're political organizers. I wonder if they come from immigrant families. I wonder if they care enough about their immigrant family's experience to step in, to speak up, to do something. Or are they so unfolded to the empire that they can find humor and solace in going online and dancing to a beat? When I go back to Ohio, I'm going to figure out what community is doing, and I'm going to figure out how I can step in big or small ways. And I'm going to try to figure out how I can help, how I can use some of my privilege, how I can acknowledge these things and be angry about it. I think anti-fascism can show up in a variety of means. We can be anti-fascist on a media level. We can be anti-fascist on a community organizing level. We can be anti-fascist on a militant level. And the responsibility of citizens that aren't exposed or impacted by the xenophobic violence is to figure out where on the spectrum you want to be when you're resorting to anti-fascist work. And joking online is literally the opposite of it. It's permissing a logic and then remixing it and then finding humor in it. It doesn't make any sense. And the last thing I'll end this on, for everyone out there, whether or not you find this funny, are you going to pull up to protect people that are going to face xenophobic violence? Are you going to pull up, or are you going to sit in your home, watch TV, and watch people engage about it online? Find ways to resist. That's literally all I can say. I also want to thank people for watching my most recent video. I deeply care about organizing work, about being an artist, about being an author, about being an educator. When I come online and talk about these things, it's not because I necessarily want a platform or whatever the fuck. It's because I see the utility as an artist, as a writer, of synthesizing thoughts into words and then turning those words into action. And I really, really also think of the Audre Lorde essay, Turning Silence into Language and Action. And that essay kind of has a different thesis. It's more talking about how silence doesn't protect us and how we need to speak up in life and how it's important to say the things we need to say before our time is gone. But I also think about the notion of turning silence into language and action, where silence is violence. In the face of supremacy and empire and imperialism, if you are silent or if you find humor in the violence happening around you, you're participating in very real violence. And they go for them, and then they're going to come for you. But do you want to wait that long? And what is your level of solidarity with other people? Because if you don't have any, you're probably a part of the fucking problem. See you later.
I have come to believe over and over that what is most important to me must be spoken, made verbal and shared, even at the risk of having it bruised or misunderstood. That the speaking profits me beyond any other effect. But some of what I experienced during that time has helped to elucidate for me much of what I feel concerning the transformation of silence into language and action. In becoming forcibly and essentially aware of what mortality meant for me, of what I wished and wanted for my life, however short it might be, priorities and omissions became very strongly etched in a merciless light, and what I most regretted were my silences. Of what had I ever been afraid? To question or to speak what I believed could have meant pain or death, but we all hurt all the time in so many different